understanding. We have the Honorable Brother Asad, man.
A Nakasar, a BB for Hodier, African liberation, black liberation, African power, black power, for every black man, woman, and child on the planet. We are the original people. I am the original man. I am a son of Africa. Peace to the listening audience out there.
And we have the Queen, Dr. Kimberly Monterian.
Good morning, listening audience. For those who tune in today, you are in tune for a treat. And so we invite you from all over, not just this nation, but the global nation,
Yes.
which calls us all together in truth. Stand firm.
Yes, and I'm Essence Divine, and we can start by looking at the U.S. government and how propaganda through disinformation and misinformation has been used historically to denigrate blacks and other non-white people. Disinformation is false content spread intentionally to cause harm. Misinformation is false content spread unintentionally and unknowingly, even when people think they are just sharing information. For example, the lie that Haitian immigrants in Ohio were eating pets, even after the local police chief debunked those claims, and it was a clear case of disinformation. And whereas reposting the wrong information, border statistics without facts, is misinformation. I'm sorry, y'all. We're unprepared right now. Up all night. We've seen how dehumanizing has been. I can't even read my dog. Please excuse me. Let me get myself together.
You got it, Brother
All
Essence.
right. Let me go back for a quick second. Disinformation dehumanizes historically, and dehumanization has been a precursor to violence against people who became perceived as the other. So in 2016, President Donald Trump's campaign strategy included racist rhetoric such as referring to Mexican immigrants as criminals and rapists. During his presidency, he crudely referred to Haiti and El Salvador as shithole countries, which, okay, excuse me, from which the United States should limit migration. He issued 3 versions of the Muslim ban and put in place a policy of separating Central American parents and children. And the U.S. presidential debate won June 27 of 2024, referencing immigrants. Former President Donald Trump suggested they're taking black jobs now, and it could be 18, it could be 19, and even 20 million people. U.S. presidential debate 2, September 10th, 2024. The President Trump also proclaimed they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets of the people that live there, and this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. So let me start by asking you, Dr. Kim, what are your thoughts on the U.S. government and its propaganda through disinformation and misinformation?
Well, I think any government, when we say U.S. government, I think any government who deliberately sends out misinformation or miseducation is a threat to their own people. You cannot represent the people that you try to undermine. And it is a form of control and manipulation so that you can continue to destabilize an area or people to continue to have control. And when you do this, you create enemies within your own border. So even though they say the United States of America, really it's the United Snakes of America, because it's the wedge between, it's always creating this very small, these small forms of misinformation can break entire communities and entire neighborhoods down. Have we seen that? We've heard terms that are applied to black people. They're lazy. They're unproductive. They're non-creative, And then after a while, once you get once you embed that in a people's mind, you make them targets to say they're dispensable, they're removable, they are of low value, and you begin to feed that to the people. So after a while, sometimes the very people they're talking about believe some of this misinformation and they act out on it. Dr. James West used to say, is that the self-fulfilled prophecy? Perhaps it could be, but it's a very dangerous way to control people. And the first thing we may have to do is to say any government who does that to their own people are an enemy themselves. You can't be our government if that is how you choose to manifest yourself.
Right. So you like to add anything?
Yes, I think it's very interesting, the two different concepts in dealing with disinformation, which basically is false information that's, told to the public and spread intentionally, and then misinformation, which is basically it's false information, but the person who's delivering the message, they might believe it, they might think that it's true, but they really have no facts whatsoever. So they're spreading propaganda unknowingly. It's dangerous whether you know it or not know it. It
That's
doesn't
good.
matter. It doesn't matter whether it's disinformation or misinformation. The main thing of it is what is the goal and what is the objective of disinformation and misinformation. That is basically the shape, the perception, and the consciousness of the people, of the masses, right? In a way that's going to really give them a false consciousness as far as from a political perspective of what's going on. And in that way, their actions are going to be based off of their thoughts, which are shaped off of the disinformation and misinformation. And the way that we counter that is with actual facts and true knowledge and real knowledge. One of the main things basically that we do in the African Center community is we understand that the main purpose of life is the great awakening, to know thyself. And that's a powerful knowledge, because when we talk about the knowledge of self, we're talking about the essence of who we truly are, the knowledge of the spirit, right? So what that does, it gets us in tune with reality, right? Which is the main thing. And that way we understand the tricks of our enemy, right? And we understand how they're trying to manipulate our minds so that they can maintain power and control, as Dr. Kim said. Also, the reason why they focus so much on power and control is because of the global resources. If they can basically control the minds of the people and their actions, they can control the resources. And
That's
we
right.
know when we're talking about resources, we're talking about economic power. And we're talking about
Yes.
capitalism and
right.
things of this nature. And that's why, the propaganda is so important for us as a people to understand it, so that we can protect ourselves from having a false consciousness that's going to benefit others, right? But the thing of it is, and that the propaganda is so strong, right, that when we look at it from an education perspective, which is, one of the most popular and effective forms of propaganda, to accept the European way of doing things and to doubt yourself, right? To have us looking for the approval of our very enemies, right? And that's why, and we speak on this often, right? The Black Consciousness movement that was started by Stephen Biko, the South African revolutionist, who said that the most potent weapon in the minds of the oppressor, in the hands of the oppressor, is the mind of the oppressed. And I think that when we talk about propaganda, the major thing they're trying to do is control our minds so they can control our actions. And then that way, they will be able to control the resources on the planet Earth. And we know that Africa has all the resources, minerals, and everything else that the world needs.
Peace. You on the line with Africans United, Know Thyself, Black Power Radio.
They're
Hello.
gonna have to cut off the radio.
Tell them to turn down their radio.
Can you turn down your radio, please?
They're gonna have to turn it off.
Hello?
Hello. Peace, brother. You got to turn
Oh,
your radio down or turn it off.
okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Greetings, sister and brothers. I just wanted to call in and say to you that I agree with what both of you said. I'd like to reference D.L. Hughley, who said that my virtues or my values are not controlled by my geography in reference to the United States of America, whatever that is. Either we live and have values, ethics, or we don't. A right is written on the bar, that is, of us, not the I of them. Thank you very much. I am pleased to listen to your program.
Thank you,
Appreciate that.
Baba.
Yes, it's Baba Amos.
Baba Atmos,
Yes.
the Grand Master.
Yes. Is he still on the line?
Yes.
Baba Atmos?
I think he hung up.
Oh,
Hello.
okay. Sending a shot back out to our beloved, one of our beloved scholars and elders in our
Yes.
community. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support, and thank you for your wisdom.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. Peace, brother. Baba. I like that. So we were just talking about the rhetoric that Trump went through during his presidential debates, also in the opening. So
Right.
how do you see that rhetoric that he was saying about the immigrants and all?
Well, it's important to understand, everything basically we just went over as far as shaping the perception of the people, right? And this way he attacks the immigrants to put fear in the minds of the European Americans and also the African Americans and any other ethnic group here, that basically to make it seem like he's on the side of the people and that these people are coming to threaten jobs and things of that nature, right? And it's a divide and conquer tactic, divide and rule. Basically to have us, looking at everything as instead of what we really should be looking at, and that is the corruption of the government, right? So basically, when you're looking at, him talking about the immigrants and things of that, now you got to understand how the Europeans got here and when they got here, and the history of what they've done, right? So it's kind of like trying to get the masses of the public in the United States on his side with his rhetoric, as far as the criminalization for one of not only Africans but also Hispanics. So these things that the president of the United States done are tactics that they've been using for a long time. Tactics really to not only shape the perception of the way that the Europeans look at what they consider to be the immigrants, right? Which I think the way the word is used these days is such a bad thing, to try to go to another country and try to make a living. So it's trying to really just divide and conquer, pit one group of people against another group of people, while the Europeans and the government sit back unscathed.
True, true. So, Dr. Kim, how do you see this disinformation impacting our mental health, our self image, or even our relationships with other oppressed groups?
Wow. Well, certainly, I believe that misinformation is a tool and a deadly weapon, and it has consequences that last generationally. And it takes forever to break down, to come back and snatch. And as I let me just say this, as one who works in the quote unquote legal field, the name of the game is when you serve the ball, you make sure the other person, if you're going to win the war, you have to respond to the serve. So if you're in the court of law and you are served paperwork, you have a duty to respond. The problem is we allow some of this stuff to go on too long, And that is the detriment to our communities, to our relationships, to ourselves. After a while, we absorb versus reject. And as a people, we have learned how we've been taught that we are more resilient when we absorb the lie. Oh, you guys are resilient people. No, you're making us absorb the abuse. And then we don't reject it and say this is wrong. Instead, we turn a rap song into it. And instead, we don't reject it. We don't storm the gates. We don't say this is incorrect. We become what people say by default, and it harms how people look at us or even want to do business with us. You talk about relation, it affects how we do business with each other, if we will even have a business. Does it force us to succumb to their education? Do we make up our own education? Do we self-educate? Do we absorb with the misinformation? Do we regurgitate the misinformation or the disinformation? We start looking to go into, we'll defend more of becoming part of the public school than creating our own schools. So we would rather sometimes become what it is that they're talking about versus rejecting or having our own standard. We become another person's standard. And then anybody can rule you just by what they say. That means that you're not thinking for yourself. And I think that goes back to many of the teachings that we
Control
have.
your thoughts.
Thank you. Control your thoughts. It is important that you learn to discipline from within versus from without.
Right.
And I think most of us are so driven by the outside cosmos, so anything just lands on our ears, on our eyes. We don't have any, you look at other cultures that are a little bit more stronger academically, is because they don't have all these outside
Illusional thing.
right, unnecessary, excuse me, something is in my eye, but constant combative stuff that they have to, and they have built their own standard. So when another one comes, they don't even know what you're talking about. They built the standard and they can prove their standard. We're going to have to learn how to come together, build our standard, and reject other standards. We reject the lie by building our own. And from there, we're not succumb to anybody's truth or fact. And it may not even be a truth. It may just be their facts, but their facts don't make it our truth or our reality. And so that is where we have to be, because if we can't interact with ourselves on a positive level, it's going to be very difficult for us to engage with others at a positive level. I know we've seen in our own communities where people come in, they can set up restaurants, they can set up smoke shops, they can set up anything, and we'll gravitate to their stuff and won't build our own. And even if we did, they wouldn't even come. They don't even feel like they have to come and support our work or our, but they can take away. They can benefit. These forms of misinformation keeps the suppression, oppression, and certainly a division amongst our people.
Brother Saw.
Yes, I think that the disinformation, which is basically intentionally putting out falsehood to the masses of the people, affects us in a negative way when we're talking about mental health. And I go straight to the American Psychiatric Association,
Yes.
who basically, wrote up an apology to the Association of Black Psychologists, right? And they talked about how they had intentionally and deliberately misdiagnosed African American men, women, and children. And this has been going on for, a long time. And I think with that admission and an apology that really means nothing, it shows that when we're talking about mental health and we're being misdiagnosed intentionally to cause further damage to the mind, has to be really taken seriously. And with that admission and other admissions, I I advise black people, African people, not to trust anything coming from the European style governments, like the United States, United Nations, the European countries, right? Because
I got another call coming,
oh,
brother.
oh,
Sorry.
okay, go ahead, brother.
Hang up at this time.
All right.
Peace. You on air with Africans United, Know Thyself, Black Power Radio.
I'm back, brother. I didn't mean to hang up. I should have put me on hold. But since you're talking about mental health,
Yes.
hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Are we good? Since
Yes,
you're
sir.
talking about mental health, I just wanted to drop a stone in the pool. In 2009, Metzel wrote, "Revolution was in the air in the 1960s. Civil rights protests demanded attention on the airways and in the streets. Anger gave way to revolt, and revolt provided the elusive promise of actual change. But a very different civil rights history evolved at the Iona State Hospital for the Criminally Insane in Iona, Michigan. Here, far from the national glare of sit-ins, boycotts, and riots, African-American men suddenly appeared in the asylum, previously white, locked wards. Some of these men came to the attention of the state after participating in civil rights demonstrations, while others were sent by the military, the penal system, or the police. Though many of the men hailed from Detroit, ambulances and patrol wagons brought men from other urban centers as well. Once at Iona, psychiatrists classified these men under a single diagnosis, schizophrenia. In the protest psychosis, psychiatrist and cultural critic Jonathan Metzl tells the shocking story of how schizophrenia became the diagnostic term overwhelmingly applied to African American men at the Iona State Hospital, and how events at Iona mirrored national conversations that increasingly link blackness, madness, and civil rights. Expertly shifting through a vast array of cultural documents, from scientific literature, music, lyrics, to riveting, tragic hospital charts, Metzler shows how association between schizophrenia and blackness emerged during the 1960s and 70s. I'll just stop there. It's important as we go back to dropsomania and other diagnoses that when you protest your injuries, when you stand amidst the chilly winds of adversity, one of the tools, as you were discussing, is the use of mental illness as a tool to denigrate you. You got to be crazy to want freedom. You got to be crazy to want equality. You got to be crazy in this land of plenty to stand up and say that you're not being treated properly. Look out for what's going to happen in Ghana. Look out for what has been the result of anybody and any group of people who have demanded their rights if they survive. I'll hang up now because I don't want to interfere with
Hey,
your program.
Baba,
And
I got a question for you, Baba. Are you
go
there?
ahead, brother.
Yes, because you mentioned Ghana, and I know you had sent me something this morning about Ghana. If you don't mind, can you kind of share with us what's the events that's taking place in Ghana?
There are two things. The most recent is that the president of Ghana presented a resolution to the UN security, that the United Nations, and 103 nations agreed that chattel slavery, that is the transatlantic slave trade, had been the most heinous, they don't use that word, crime ever committed on the planet. And 3 countries disagreed. Argentina, we'll throw them in the wastebasket of history.
Right.
Israel, because I'll talk to them just briefly, and the United States. The perpetrator of this enslavement being the United States as recipients of the European slave trade, because many of the colonists came to the States and continued the oppression that they started in Europe. There's a book that I read many years ago that talked about serfs were a form of slavery in Europe, but with the difference that they could not be sold apart from the land. But anyway, so the ideal, the values and virtues of slavery is European and Arab. But let's go on. So the United States voted against the declaration as well as Israel. Now, my thought, whether anyone agrees with me or not, is still my thought. And I have no proof, but they have spent centuries declaring themselves the victims of something called enslavement in Africa with no proof.
Right.
And that is their eschatology, their religious belief. And you can believe whatever you want, but don't tell me it's raining when something else is falling on my head. Right. And the other piece is that if they're no longer the victims of that enslavement for 400 years, they also want to be the latest victims of the so-called Holocaust. Right. And one thing the United States said was that it was historical. That's why they voted against them. Well, did you vote against those museums that you set up to remind us of what supposedly happened in Germany?
That's
and
right.
I'm not saying it didn't, but have you ever set up a museum to talk about the 20 million or so killed in Belgium by Leopold and the continuing Holocaust caused by the European countries across the continent since 1884, 1885, and even before? The Argentinians, I don't know what their problem is beyond that they are reflecting their European masters or the Europeanization of Argentina.
Right.
The second piece is that in 2018, Ghana signed an agreement with the United States to allow them to put troops in their country and to give them diplomatic immunity and to give them free access to the country without any form of investigation of them. Those are the two things that I would like to lay on the table.
Would you say those two are contradicting?
They are, but the question becomes that it was the prior president who did it, and do you undo what a prior president has done? And the question is, how do you get them out once they've gotten in? And it's like rats or roaches. They tend to multiply. I mean, they once they establish a foothold, because when we go to Ghana and when we go to Elmina and we go to Christiansborg, we understand that that's how the Europeans began to export our people in their rape of Africa through those forts that they established. Now, if people who run around talking about what Africans participated willingly in the trade, well, why do you have to establish a fort if the people who live there are glad that you're taking people away?
Right.
You don't need a fort. And they are large, massive buildings,
Yes, they are.
with cannons, etc. So in my opinion, we need to reevaluate people who are running around talking about we participated. Obviously, as African people, wherever we look, we can find some collaborators, but I question whether it was as easy as they would like to say, that the European just showed up and said, give me some of your people, and we said, okay. So I thank you. I'm sorry. I hopefully I didn't.
Thank you, Baba.
Yes.
Thank you.
Always
It's always
welcome.
a pleasure.
Always.
Yes.
Sir.
An honor. Thank you, Baba.
Thank you for the knowledge.
Well, going back to just circling the conversation on mental health, how much of this is induced by its own country is a question. Is that even healthy? That is a deliberate tactic to control your people. Now, we hear it, we talk about it, but when does it actually become a crime against, say, we talked about Ghana, and Ghana's resolution is that they call slavery a crime. The same tactics are happening today where this misinformation is deliberately done to his own people,
Right.
and that is a crime. Whether it was a crime 400 years ago on the people, on black people, or is it still continuing? The crime is still continuing.
Yes.
Yes.
And so when do we call that out? Or do we just say, oh, well, that's a tactic? Or we get so immune to being treated that way, oh, well, that's just misinformation. Or, they've learned how to give us very docile words or diagnoses to almost accommodate the behaviors versus us saying, no, this is an outlaw against humanity.
Right. Indeed.
And that's why it was probably so welcome in their own mind that they could reject passing the law or even acknowledging, because they have learned how to be a wordsmith for so long that they don't have to take responsibility. So, whatever religion you say you are, we're just going to say 9 times out of 10, you can't be a Christian nation because Christianity requires that you take responsibility for your own actions. And that's furthest from what, these people do. Instead, they say it is almost lawful for them to miseducate their people or misinform their people just to have control. Anytime you need to have control over people, you're already out of pocket. You're not a government. You're an enslavement institution.
A criminal.
You are a criminal, and you have always been. This isn't something that just happened today. And I think we don't know how to. The problem is not them, because it sounds like since they've existed, this is who they are. It's us learning how to recognize and detach immediately. Because after a while, we help them build the institutions that create the misinformation.
And help them maintain it.
And come on, and get a paycheck and a promotion. As long as we keep the information coming, we'll figure we'll get to it later. Well, no, that's not how life is supposed to be, is that you constantly get filled with this stuff, because if you don't reject it or swat it back, you become a perpetrator of the very lie that you're supposed to be against.
And speaking on the mental health, we talking about what was his name? Sound right? Circa around the 1800s sometimes.
1852.
Right. So he already was diagnosing drapetomania,
Right.
and some other fancy words he was coming up with, and his what was his resolution for it was murder, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, to assassinate the
Punishment.
person,
Right.
his punishment. So we talking about crimes starting back then, and we were just talking about Trump presidential debates, who's also a felon 34 times right now. We
And
was
a
talking
mental
about
health
that,
patient. And a mental health patient on the run.
Right. And that's 2024. So we coming from the 1800s to 2024. That's just what we that, because it's probably go way back further than that also.
So Brother Essence and Brother Asar, let me ask you this, and Baba, you're out there. We have numerous examples of I hate to say these people, those people, that terminology, but we talk about drapetomania, and we talk about what he so-called diagnosed us with, which we know is totally wrong. But what do we diagnose him with? What is that mental health diagnosis for a person who obviously is so insane that they believe a slave a person that they've kidnapped? First of all believe that you could own a person. I think that's how we've always had that. That's a mental health issue, for you to believe that you can own a person and then hold them in bondage, and if they leave, they have a mental problem. Should we not have start talking to our institutions about how do you diagnose other people who think that they are rightfully so? Because if we don't declare these behaviors as having a mental illness, we will put them downtown on the Capitol building and make them heroes and not mental health patients or crazy or criminals or any of the above.
and the institutions help push the propaganda also.
Yes.
We're talking about the education system. Losing my train of y'all got to bear with me just a little bit.
No, and it's a
But,
question. What do we
yeah.
do? Well,
So-
how do we address their mental health?
right.
Well, I
So-
think. Go ahead on, brother.
No, go ahead. I
Yeah.
was gonna come right back.
Well, I think really, we got to understand propaganda, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, like Baba had picked up on, what we were speaking on as far as the mental health. And so he took it back to how they was gathering all these black men, all of our brothers, and because they were basically protesting against, the unjust, laws and stuff that we was facing. And, Jim Crow laws, just coming out of slavery. And so they said, well, anyone who protests against, the United States government, we're going to say that they are mentally insane or have schizophrenia, right? So this, and that goes to the point where Dr. Kim was just asking the question, who diagnoses them? And see, that's the key right there, wherein we don't reject the propaganda and we say that, okay, we have schizophrenia. The same tactics that they was using back then that Baba Atmos was talking about are the same tactics that they're using on our babies today.
That is correct.
On our children.
Yes.
ADDHD, ADHD, AHD, all these different, what's the other one? They put them on the Ritalin. They put them on all types of psychotropic drugs, right? And this is important, right? 3 major ways of teaching people, right, is through education, what you're being taught, right? So we look at what we're being taught.
That's right.
In the education system. We're being taught that we have deficiencies when it comes to controlling ourselves and that we have mental issues, right? What we hear the same things, right? And what we see the way that they look at us, which makes us look at ourselves in a way because we have said they have programmed in our minds that they are authority when it comes to what black people need.
Right.
And we're not the authority. Right? And so it's still a relationship where they feel like they're the parents and we're the children. And that's why one of the things we talk about on this show all the time is the knowledge of self. Because it helps us to automatically reject the propaganda by understanding who we are, understanding, like Baba was talking about, the values that we have as a people, controlling our thoughts. Because we know if we can control our thoughts, we can control our actions.
That's right.
Right? And we can be steadfast in our purpose for liberation, right? For sovereignty, for global power, which is what we need. It's something that we can't reject. Because anytime we have to go to the United Nations to have something so atrocious as the transatlantic slave trade to be deemed as the gravest crime against humanity, we already knew that as a people. We don't need the approval of anyone on our history and the impact that it's had on us. But what the good thing about it, though, even though we know what the United Nations is all about, and there's an acknowledgement, it's made up of 195 countries, right? All over the planet, not just the European countries. Baba said that 103 people voted in favor of the resolution that was proposed by Ghana's president, right? So that way it was approved. The European countries, most of those abstained from voting, over 50-something. And the 3 countries that denied it or didn't want to approve the resolution was, like he said, the United States of America, Israel, and Argentina. The United States of America. I think we really need to take and pay attention to this. All African Americans or Africans in American, black people, however we want to be identified. If the United States does not want to be held accountable for its actions, it's a reason for it. It's a reason for the denial because they want to keep what going? They want to keep the propaganda going because they know if they say, yes, it was, and then everybody's going to flood them, well, we deserve reparations. But this, to me, this whole thing in dealing with the United States, the European countries, Israel, is the way that they view us as a people, right? And that's why I asked Baba, was it a contradictory within the resolution and the agreement that they made for defense with the United States? And I'm glad he pointed it out to me that that was something that the last president did. Well, I feel like if the last president did it, it can be undone by the current president, especially when it hurts the country, it hurts the continent, and it hurts the people.
Right, right. And that's what I was trying to get to myself. Like you said, how they see us as a people, and I want what I was trying to how do we see ourselves as a people? What's our self image?
Right. See, and that's it. That's what the whole propaganda is about. It's well, really, more so than anything, is to control our minds and control our actions. When they can get their people, the Europeans and the rest of the world, to agree with them, it makes their job easier, right? But what will make our job easier is when we come together consciously, right, with the right knowledge, the knowledge of self, with one agenda, for liberation and global power. And then that's when our minds will start working together as a whole. But they know as long as they can keep us divided, it makes their work easier. It makes them able to control us easier, our actions, our thoughts, and everything, right? With what, miseducation, disinformation, misinformation, propaganda, social media, mass media, word of mouth, to the point wherein when we believe the lies and when we believe the propaganda, it basically puts us in a position where we become self-loathing, self-hating. We look at our brothers and sisters as the enemy, and that's the way that they want us to think, and that's why it's so important, for us to reach out, to the conscious brothers and sisters, pull together so that we can reach the brothers and sisters who are considered to be unconsciousness, and start to gently wake them up so that they can understand what's going on, because it's been a whole lot of damage that's been done to us spiritually, mentally, and physically, psychologically, and it's still going on today, right? And it was proven last week at the United Nations conference when the United States basically said what they said, and that was that in a sense that we're not going to admit to any wrongdoing, and we don't feel like the black people deserve anything.
And the move is kind of, in my mind, it's kind of elementary, the moves that they make too, like how we can't see through this divide, the way they try to
And
cause this division.
absolutely, I think it's not just elementary, but I feel like it's a very simple method they've been using for years. And that then the question is not upon them. The question is upon us. What do we do? Why would we be shocked? And the question is, if you know that, then why aren't we mobilizing? Why aren't we strategizing? Why aren't we applying a different method if we know they blatantly hate us? And what do they need to say? What do they need to do in order to say, we hate your guts, or we don't want? I don't know why we feel like, why we're shocked for latter words. I'm shocked that we haven't responded. Remember, I said in the court of law, when they serve you, you serve them back. Why haven't we swung back? We love tennis, we love ping pong, and we love pickleball, but we do not know how to swing back at an enemy. We just watch them serve us on the international stage and say, yes, we had you enslaved. Yes, we killed your people. Yes, we enslaved your people, sold your children down the river, made you all jump overboard, did whatever we could to you, and we don't have to acknowledge it. And perhaps they don't have to acknowledge it because they don't even feel like what they did is wrong, especially if they're still using many of the same tools today. Why would I admit when I'm still using these same forms of enslavement, just in different ways? That's our standard for us, not their standard for us. And so what do we do? How do we respond? How do we act? And really, how do we should have been acted.
A long time ago, they keep us preoccupied with, as you stated earlier, delusional things, just material things, mostly falsehood, as Brother Saw said, things
Yes.
that will pass away. But we we so
I like.
closed minded or narrow minded that we can't see that these things are illusional and they will pass away. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, I think that we're seeing it now because, with over 100 and something countries, voting in favor that it was the gravest crime against humanity is saying a lot the way the global world is looking at it. We got to understand that this world ain't just made up of European nations
Right.
and Europeans, right? So that in itself is progress because now everyone, besides the European nations and Argentina and Israel, are looking at what happened to us and our ancestors as the greatest or the gravest crime against humanity. See, so that puts us now it puts us in a position where this is documented with the United Nations, whether they like it or not. So there are moves that can be made now with this knowledge and information as far as acknowledgement by the rest of the world. Now, how do we start to repair the damages? And that goes to the question that both of y'all had, which were great questions, is it's our responsibility. And I think that that's what's taking place now. When you look at Ghana's president, who has been very active, because reparations isn't just talking about compensation now. It's kind of like from a holistic perspective, right?
That's right.
Dealing with artifacts, dealing with human rights, international law. So now we have the whole world's attention because of this United Nations conference and the vote in favor of the crime against Africans as the greatest crime against humanity in the history. So they can't backpedal from that. So what we have to do is continue to do like Kwame Ture always said, organize, organize,
Yes,
organize.
absolutely.
And that's what Ghana has been doing. That's what we got the AES doing with Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. So we have a lot of great positive things going on now because of the conversation, right? And because of the action. But what we have to do is we can't take our eyes off of the goal and the objective, which is for liberation and global power. Because what happens is they always try to come with distractions, right? To take our mind off of the focus of liberation, right? And I think one of the key things in our liberation, right, we don't really need the acknowledgement of the United States and the European countries for what we know was already the gravest. But what this does is show us the way they view us and how they never intend to do anything that's going to lead to justice because of the injustice that they've caused. So this is a fact that we really have to look at, right? And the power is within us.
Yes.
The power is within our minds and within our spirits in the way that we move, right?
And
Go
let me
ahead.
say this,
Yes,
brother.
go ahead on.
It is also incumbent upon us to understand that they may not never give us justice.
Right.
See, that's a
That's right.
reality.
Yes.
Like if we're looking for this grand moment of them acknowledging,
happen.
it ain't happening.
Yes.
So if you even go back to when George Floyd happened, the whole world, we had an example that was good enough then for the world. The world chimed in. They start pulling down their statues. People start coming up with I'll say temporal solutions as to what can be done. We had all kind of people coming out, but it's not real enough to sustain us. And I think we need to have a deeper dive as to what we're really dealing with. I think we feel like we can change, little white America will just have a moral compass and we just gonna all come together and put them on the spot. And even for one, let us first acknowledge. We want to say thank you to the Ghanaian president.
Right.
We want to say thank you for your efforts to acknowledge an atrocity on your end, but also to repair and bring us back home in the right way. That says 1,000. That has no value that we can put in today's term. It's not financial. It is beyond anything tangible. So we want to say thank you for your heart and your willingness to bring some form of healing
Yes.
across the globe, because this just didn't affect us. It
Right.
affected the global human race. And we
Yes, it
say
did.
thank you so kindly. And to the 123 other countries
right.
that stood for what was without your Christianity or your religion. Thank you for just saying we acknowledge wrong.
Right.
Right.
We know what is right and wrong, which is one of our big pet peeves around here when we teach, knowing the difference between what's right and what's wrong. We say thank you for that. And we send it right from the office here amongst Africans United, which means African United is not just in Africa. It is everywhere. And we
all over the
represent
diaspora.
from here back to you. Again, thank you. And for those who abstained, there are like 50 something countries
53.
who lead their people every day, but did not know that one act in history caused the demise over 400 years. When you say that you abstain, that means you've already chosen. You just were not courageous enough to be transparent. But we see you. We know exactly how you feel, and we will remember you as we continue on this quest to bring oneness. Last but not least, the last three, we don't expect anything different. That is why we will respond in our own way, and we will make sure you understand that you don't run the world, nor do you speak for humanity, because you have no sense of humanity. You are a bully and a beast, and you should be set down. And hopefully that will come to, we hope that will come to play at some point, because you don't deserve to serve in any capacity with humans. If you cannot acknowledge over, and I won't say 400 years, because we're still living under that rule right now. We're still under. It may not be as severe, but it is here. And again, we want to say thank you, Ghana, for your total efforts and those who stand with you, including the Black diaspora that is connected to the African diaspora from America.
That's great stuff, Dr. Kim. Something that's very imperative to remember was that we're 195 nations, I think.
Right.
Yes, sir.
How many you said?
123.
123.
123 by record.
123. That's right off the top of my head. That's probably around 91% or something. So, like you said, we are starting to recognize. I'm assuming sooner or later, as a whole, it'll.
Well,
come
it needed
through.
to be put
But-
on the record.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we don't know. I think even Brother Sarah and I, yourself, we go back to the resolution that the city of Raleigh made. And we said we have to hold them accountable. Who voted for, who did not vote, and where are we now when it comes to the resolution? Are we holding these people accountable? Because they can't hold themselves accountable. The perpetrator or the pedophile or the rapist or the murderer don't heal himself. He is sick. Those three countries are ran by sick folk.
I think that also, you got to give, Ghana and its, president and government a lot of credit
Yes.
for representing, all of Africa and the diaspora, as Dr. Kim, basically just said. One point I want to make out is, it was real powerful, and it's been getting a lot of attention in the media, all forms of media. And it was interesting how you had members of, the FBA, Foundational Black Americans, who are very anti-African, right? And some other groups, right? ADOS, right? And they was out there protesting about the resolution
No.
because they don't want to be a part of it. But remember, they are the ones who claiming delineation, that they don't want to have nothing to do with Africa or Africans. So why are you there trying to attach yourself to something that you have detached yourself from? If you don't want to be a part of the African community,
Sure.
fine, stay away. Why would you, saying that you're against Africans, be outside protesting something that's going to benefit all Africans on the planet? That's self-hate, right? And it's also propaganda.
It is.
And they're being paid. And it makes them look really silly To be honest. And I'm gonna tell you, I love all our black brothers and sisters, but I don't feel sorry for them, right? Because they are intentionally, trying to disrupt a movement that's going to really be good for black people all over the world, right?
Yes.
Because, I've been paying attention to the president of Ghana for over a year and some change now, and the brother is strong and he's smart, which is very important.
Yes.
And he's articulate, right? And see, that's the thing, right? When you have strong brothers like him and the brother from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, right? They're not going to bend to the will of the oppressors to satisfy, their greed or corruption.
Come on. Thank you,
right?
Ghana.
Because they are standing up for the people.
Yes.
And they realize that, okay, now's the time in history where really we made history with the acknowledgement by the 123 countries. We got it approved, which is the main thing.
Yes.
That it was approved, regardless of how the United States feel about it,
Right.
regardless of how Israel feel about it, regardless of how Argentina or the other 50-something countries from Europe or wherever they're from.
Right.
The world has made a statement
That's right.
that
right.
what happened to us and our ancestors is the gravest crime against humanity, right? And the damages must be repaired, right? We have a responsibility to do what we're supposed to do, but we also have a responsibility to put pressure
Come on.
on those who not only agreed, because I think the ones that agreed are willing to make, pay reparations or whatever, some type of compensation for the role that they played, if they played any role in it whatsoever.
That's correct.
But it's the ones who played the biggest roles are the ones who basically didn't approve it and abstained from voting. They didn't want to vote one way or another.
That's right.
But if you don't vote, we know where you stand.
Yeah,
You
but
feel
you
like
vote,
it was
but you
okay.
vote, but you voted. You
Right.
you actually did vote.
Yeah.
You said when you said I don't have an opinion, we know your opinion.
Right.
And it's not rocket science. We're not asking you to decode whether the people who stole us were aliens or humans. This is not a trivial question or a trivial demand.
Right.
This is just for you to acknowledge that this was one of the most horrific atrocities against humanity in history. So for you to deny blacks that's also saying that you are denying us human life. And then not only does the propaganda continue, but the murders, the death, the quality of life. What happens after they disseminate propaganda is immediately there's a response to it. You remember when they start talking about, quote unquote, the Jews are this or the Jews are that, when Hitler and his men, they used propaganda. Hitler and his men used propaganda as one of the number one messages or tactics in warfare to bring the Jews into submission. Once he could convince the rest of the nation that they were bad, they were thieves, they were undermining Germany, then everybody joined in as a national agenda. It became nationalist. He even, it's been said that Hitler even served food on one day for all of his people. See, the goal is to have a national agenda of hate. And so you disseminate the hate, you disseminate the misinformation, so everybody comes on board. Everybody, when it's time to, round up a Jew or whomever, everybody tells. It becomes national. And so when they denied us at the UN, really they sent word back to the United States of America that these people are never to be vindicated for the crimes we committed. See, it's not just the misinformation, it's what happens after the information. If you all remember in Florida when Ron DeSantis talked about black people came over here as slaves and they did pretty good with their skills, and they were almost like entrepreneurs that they had apprenticeship, immediately a young man got killed. And it was a big controversy because the black people felt like, well, why are you here to pay your respects when you actually put out a hit? You put out a hit by using disseminating misinformation. So when you speak a certain thing, Charlie Kirk, you put out certain words, they come back. They have a response. These words have a response that goes with it. So them stating that they're not with us sends out an alert to the rest of the world. It says they're not protected under us. Those we have to be very careful about misinformation and miseducation. It determines how we live. It determines where we live. It determines the quality of life. That's why it's so important that we're talking about it today, is because this information carries with it an agenda. It's just not, okay, well, we're just going to teach wrong stuff. No.
Right.
It's no, it comes with a manifesto
Right.
that says we want it to act a certain way. We want it to respond a certain way. Heck, they even tell you before they go to war, they have to sell the war to the American people. Whether the war is legit or not,
Right.
they have to sell it so that it can fall on a certain ground so we can support it. They look for a certain response. This misinformation comes with a mandate that it manifests something, and we're not paying attention to what that agenda is.
What we do know, to spread this type of disinformation, the misinformation, the propaganda as a whole takes power.
Yes.
So to get it over to all the masses and to get them to, halfway believe it if they don't fully believe it.
Right.
So it takes power. Now I want to just get into Joseph Nye, who was a political scientist,
Yes.
Harvard, and he had a distinction between soft power and hard power. So the difference between making someone want what you want versus making them do what you want. So power shapes everything in intentional relations. When Russia invaded Ukraine, that was hard power: tanks, missiles, economic pressure. While soft power shows up through culture, political values, and foreign policies that others see as legitimate and beneficial. I might mess his name up, but I'm gonna give him a good try. Louis Althusser's ideology and ideological state apparatuses helps us understand how institutions like schools, media, and churches work as ideological state apparatuses that function like soft power, while the police, the courts, military operate as repressive state apparatuses that function like hard power. So, Brother Saw, can you give an example of soft power and hard power and how they are used by government?
Yeah, yes, and I really like the breakdown of soft power and hard power by, I think, the professor at Harvard, Joseph Nye.
Yes.
And also the ideological state apparatus and repressive state apparatus by Althusser. Like, I think that, we look at these two white philosophers, right, that, deal in psychology in the way the mind works, right? I think that it's important for us to do like Sun Tzu said: know thyself, know thy enemy, and know the type of terrain, right? And we can see in soft power, right, one of the examples that they use that influence us is our taste for things, right? And how do they do that? Through advertisement, through commercials, McDonald's, or basically a Gucci bag or whatever, to basically put these images that you see, you run across, to try to influence you to not so much, think like they do, but to keep your mind from focus on things that really have substance, to get you to focus and think of things from a superficial way, right? And it's important to understand, like they say, they influence the mind to want to kind of like be like them and want the things that they want. Hard power is simple. It's like they said, the invasion of Ukraine. Or we can go to something in recent history, like the way the United States went in there and
Venezuela.
captured, like, and kidnapped the president in Venezuela, him and his wife, and then also on Christmas Day when the United States, they bombed Nigeria. All of those things are hard power, right? And these are things basically that it's important to understand. I like to go to Al Thussin, right, in the ideological state apparatus and repressive state apparatus, where the ideological state apparatus is kind of similar to soft power, except it's focused more on the institutions, right, in the education to influence the mind through, like, the institution of the church, the institution of the injustice system, right? The institution of education. These institutions basically that, shape the consciousness of the mind of how you're supposed to operate in society as a citizen, right? And that ideological state apparatus kind of mirrors soft power as far as influence, because the church influences, the education system influences us, the music industry influences us, and I think it's a lot of soft power in music, right? When it comes to our young brothers and sisters, as far as, to want these Jordans or to want to wear, these nice chains or earrings or these hairstyles or anything dealing with fashion that they want to put in the culture. And that's the most effective way to use soft power. It's within the culture, right? Now, but when we're talking about ideological state apparatus, now we're talking about the institutions which are going to shape our mind and our consciousness. Right. Now, repressive state apparatus mirrors hard power, where force is used. And Al Thussin said in the repressive state apparatus, they use things like what? Prison, right? The military, the police force, right? The threat of force or the threat of violence to control the people. All of these are psychological tools that are used to shape your consciousness and control your mind, control your thoughts, and control your actions, right? So those are two good examples of European philosophers, right? In the way that they think, in the way that they not only oppress the mind, but oppress the body as well.
That's good.
Dr. Kim, you want to add on to that?
Um,
Matter of fact, let me ask you like this: what are some practical tools that we can use to to recognize when soft power narratives are pushed on us while they're getting ready to, bring in the hard power?
Oh, that's good.
They work hand in hand. That's good.
They really do. I think they sort of dumb us down on the one end, and then they bring the force in behind it. Well, first of all, I think is before we jump to the high, we must stay understanding the low.
Right.
And like Brother Asar mentioned about how the softer tactics culturally are used on us because they know we are a cultural people.
Right.
So when you introduce the music and you introduce the arts and the entertainment, it's pretty much to help soften your mental combativeness. It's almost to help you take your guard down because that's your human level.
Right.
That's your human side. The hard portion basically says that by any means necessary. So you don't even have to consider humanity. You can shoot them. It's the military complex. And then here's where you could kill 165 girls at a school in Iran and not take any responsibility for it. Here we go back to the soft, and we have to recognize what is the message to us when it comes to the agenda. We have to, first of all, put religion. This is where you'll find these institutions and nice educations and what have you. We have to understand what their place is before we let it displace us.
Right.
Because eventually, religion, not used the proper way, can displace us. Religion is great until it's used as a weapon. Remember, loving God or, being spiritual is a very nice thing to have in any human's life. But when they start using it as a form of control, or even entire tribes were removed based off of the fight for how we're going to implement religion. We really have to be more conscious about how some of these tools are used against us,
Right.
and hold on to its purest form without allowing the government to manipulate those tools to ensnare us. And then and I think that goes back to knowing thyself. How do we use these tools? How do we use music? Yes, music is a part of the black culture. It's probably embedded in our bones at birth. It's in the DNA. But we can't let other people exploit our gift or our talents. We can't afford to allow them to, they say drink responsibly. I say sing responsibly, rap responsibly. We have to be responsible for these soft tools, because they're sometimes just as powerful as the hard tool. It's just a little more subtle.
Yeah. Nah,
Brother
go ahead.
Essence, if I may, because I wanna go back a little something that what we was talking about. Um, it just slipped my mind, but it was dealing with the government. Oh yeah, and that was the vote against the resolution by the United States, Israel, and Argentina. I'm not upset about it, and I don't think we should be upset about it. I don't think we should be outraged about it, because these are their truest thoughts in the way they feel, and we got to understand in propaganda, a lot of times, like they want us to get upset about the decisions they make and look at it in a certain type of way, because they can care less how we feel about whether they voted in our favor or not. Because if they really wanted to do the right thing, what they had did, they would
They
have
would've did the right
acknowledged
thing.
it.
Yeah.
So they are not acknowledging it intentionally, and that's also, remember, about the mental health. It's to affect us psychologically, knowing that we're in this country in the way they feel. We have to use that as a tool for ourselves of empowerment.
That's right.
Right? And that is the truth, right? Number 10, have the ability to distinguish the real from the unreal. Those are their real feelings, right? But at the same time, we got to understand a lot of times they make moves to what? Throw us off balance, right? So we can't get off balance because we know where they stand. Now what we have to do is organize and move accordingly, which we should have been doing anyway.
Anyway.
Because we already knew these things, but now it's, in a sense, we have more ammunition and we have more support with the 123 countries voting in favor of the resolution.
And sometimes, just seeing or now knowing about the way the votes went, that sometimes that'll start
Oh,
waking the people up. They're like,
yeah.
okay,
But we shouldn't be, I don't think we should be mad at the United States or surprised, because I think secretly, deep within a lot of black people, we want America to be this great country for some reason, that we've been taught that it was. But I don't see it happening, right, based off history. America will fall. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the great leader of the Nation of Islam, he wrote a book, The Fall of America.
yeah,
And I think that America is going to fall. And I think when you had this many countries, looking at the United States, like y'all could have abstained, but y'all chose to vote against it. And I think that was done intentionally.
and let me state this first and foremost. I believe the same way you do, America will fall, and I see it crumbling right before my eyes. Each day, right now.
Right. It been
Yeah.
fair for us.
Yeah, but
Right.
so many believe in this system.
Right.
So many do, and that's
Now, do
what
you
that's
think? Let me ask you with both this. Do you think this, as we come up against both of the decision that was made for the resolution, but also, what do you think humanity is thirsty for? And I'm not just saying America, but the the pattern of who America is. Because make no mistake about it, not only do the people within this so-called country believe its dominance and how quote unquote great it is, but there are other countries that try to mimic it. Now, I'm glad. I mean, no, they think America is like. I get tickled when they call them other people third world countries, and I'm
Right.
thinking, well, how did you appropriate that you were a first world country?
Right.
Who gave you that award, or did you grade yourself? There are people out there that envy, yes, America, but they also are. They want to be with America. They want to em- emulate America, and no matter what atrocity it is, they still want to be. Even within this country, I don't care how much they steal, kill, or destroy, you have people right here on this soil who think that they are the cat's meow to the world. So then, what is that? Because remember, Trump didn't put himself on that platform to call himself president. It was a people who
That's voted to me.
that
That's right.
it's a mentality.
Right.
So without saying that the United States, if we remove that whole incident on March the 25th, who are we really dealing with? Is the question. Because obviously, you don't need a vote to tell us who America is.
Right. Exactly.
What do we do without that vote? How do we respond for ourselves with or without that vote?
Yeah.
Yes, that's a really good question, and because I don't think but see, we've been hitting the head so hard that a lot of times we slow in waking up, right? And this is more ammunition that's being pushed out to wake up people. So in a sense, it's good because now people are looking at the United States how we should have been looking at it.
Yeah.
I know the way I've been looking at it.
Sure.
Since I've been studying for the last 20 years and the knowledge that I've acquired
Acquired.
in the facts. And,
Good.
and also not only historical events, but my own personal historical events with this country, even things that's going on today, in this country, not just for myself, but for other, black brothers and sisters throughout the United States and globally. And I think that, that's one of the things we have to do is really understand the power of working together, sticking together, and uniting for a common cause. And that is, for the liberation of all black people. And that's why, I'm so proud of, some of our African brothers and sisters in Africa, like the president of Ghana, and then
Yes.
also, the whole AES, and even the brothers and sisters here in the diaspora that stand up, for
Yes.
African liberation and black liberation for all black people,
Yes.
and it's a lot of us, right? But what has to happen is we have to keep pushing the message out. We have to keep educating our youth. We have to teach the truth. We can't be scared to teach the truth about this country.
That is correct.
And the things that they have done, right? Because it's always better to tell the truth than to tell a lie.
It's true. And then to say, this whatever they want to call it was made of a bunch of sociopaths. They're not Christians. They're crazy. And so we've allowed that propaganda to sort of make us hold back on how we address who they are. Oh, they were nice Christian men and women who were brilliant and signed the Declaration of Independence while they had slaves tied to the tree, while they had children who they raped, Thomas Jefferson. So they've given us words to apply to people who were psychopaths or had mental health issues, and then they came together and formed so and so a country. Then why are we having a problem today? If that is what we want to call them, why are we having a problem today with your whole entire United States Department of Justice, who cannot unveil one pedophile in over 35,000 pages? Y'all, come on. We're still going to call it a country and not a group of rich white men who feel entitled to human traffic? Let's break it down. A state cannot own a human. You cannot say a state, I'm an educator.
You just said something real key, Dr. Kim,
All
and
right.
that was human trafficking, right?
Human
Because
trafficking.
we was human trafficking over here. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's a really important point, right? And so that's why they can't admit to their crimes,
Okay.
right?
All right, Brother Kim.
Because not only are they practicing human trafficking today, and I'm pretty sure you're talking about the Epstein files
That
and
is
things like that,
correct.
they was committing human trafficking hundreds and
Yes.
hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So this is a practice
It's a
that,
practice.
that they have become well acquainted with.
Come on.
And that is basically moving people from one place to another, right? And so, of course, they're gonna always try to cover their tracks, right? And where there is injustice, there can be no justice.
That's right.
So there can be no justice here, and I think that that's a
That's right.
fact that we have to accept as a people.
That's right.
We can never think that they're going to become moral people or benevolent, towards, any non-white person,
Right.
because they have a history of not only, mistreating Africans, black people, but also the Asians, and other ethnic groups. So, the thing I feel like,
And their own.
right,
When you touch your own children at 13 and 14 years of age and traffic them from America to the Virgin Islands, we're just talking about you have a mental health. It don't matter who it is. The Africans, yes, we were treated as enslaved people, sold, borrowed. But we're talking about a mentality of crime, just crime, period, of human trafficking,
But
enslavement, and when we talk about causing people to jump all overboard just to escape
right,
enslavement,
the madness.
committing suicide,
Right.
we're talking about atrocities upon atrocities, and them, no matter who it is, never admitting they're wrong. Let me say this: they never. I don't care who it is or what it is. They never admit they're wrong.
I can take accountability.
Never.
But what's more concerning to me is that, see, we know what they're gonna do. They've been doing this for years to us,
Right.
so we should be expecting this already. But what's more concerning to me is the brothers and sisters of ours who know this type of stuff, who know this information, who's educated well on the history of America, but they still go out and help push the propaganda for the government. And I think that's a more concerning cause to me, in my opinion. Anyway, the FBA's per se. What's the other?
ADOS.
The ADOS, right?
Have we, let me ask you all, do you think that's natural, or do you think that has become a mental health issue in itself?
What's that?
Well,
When you start adopting or assimilating with a lie that you know is a lie.
well, I think
Help us.
I think a lot of our brothers and sisters get more caught up in something you like to say all the time, survival mode, and they start taking these, and then they they get compromised, and they start taking a little bit of they get a little more, they get a little bit of power, over a certain other group of people, and they from they get some breadcrumbs maybe from the government or wherever. They get some crumbs just to keep the other people pushed down and
But
oppressed.
I like
whatever.
to say so. It's also, and see, this is important. It's a lot of it is because they really have a lack of knowledge, right? They haven't been taught properly. That's why in Shetawat Netta, right, number 13, Shetawat Netta enjoins the proper raising and education of the children. So if you're not raised with the proper knowledge, right, you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to accept things basically that are not going to help you out, right? And this isn't making excuses for them, right? Because remember, ignorance is a force. So if you don't know something and you think what you know is correct, and you stand 10 toes down on that, right? And you feel like you firmly establishing what you know, but what you know is wrong, right? Of course you're going to go against your brothers and sisters because you don't have the right knowledge. And that's why it was so interesting when the FBA members were outside of the United Nations conference trying to protest when they already said that they don't want to have nothing to do with Africans.
Yeah.
Right? So it's contradictory. Right? So, and it's very frustrating to listen to brothers and sisters try to not only distract but disrupt any type of positive movement. And all of them have basically, the same personality, and that is a personality of being unreasonable. Right. And so Dr. Kim asked the question basically as far as when you're talking about mental health, delusion. Delusion is a part of having
It
a
really
mental
is.
illness,
That's
right?
illness,
And a
yeah.
lot of times we become delusional in things that we hear without facts. The information that we disseminate and that we share are based off of a lot of our scholars, right? Our authors, historians, revolutionists, anthropologists, archaeologists, people who really study, for years and years and years, who are not only professional but also experts and are well acclaimed, globally. So I haven't heard anything like that come out of anybody from the FBA's, you know, conversation. Everything they talk about is anti-African, right? And I was talking with my Jegna, Baba Arkmos, last week, and he just made a really, really great point as far as, some of the strategies that we can take on as a people, right? And he used the example of the Jews and anti-Semitism. Anytime something is said about the Jews, you hear a big outcry.
That is correct.
About, that's anti-Semitism. So Baba was like, we need a word. He said anti-Africanism.
That's
He
right.
said, but it can be any word.
That's
But
good.
anytime we hear something negative about black people or African people,
We don't swat back.
that
He's
we
right.
basically we come together and we just attack, whatever issue it is where they're trying to dehumanize us
That's
or
right.
denigrate us or just basically knock us down even further than what they've knocked us down. And I think that's a great strategy. That Baba Akmos
Yes.
recommended and say that, we need to partake in. And I agree with him. Right? Anytime anything is said negative about black people or African, we should all basically attack it.
I agree. And that's why I said it is very important that when it comes to propaganda, that we have something that we serve back over the
Right,
thing.
indeed.
We don't just absorb it and be like, oh, those are the resilient people. No, we don't. This is not the time for us to absorb abuse.
Right.
We're supposed to throw it back and have a strategy back. So when we see a United States or Argentina, whoever it is, we should be constantly thinking about ways that we can return.
Right.
We don't accept that, and we fight harder. We just don't accept you. That's not acceptable. You rejecting us on the international stage is unacceptable. You should be dealt with by blacks and African Americans and Africans across the world. There should be a punishment for you. You should not be allowed to lead. First of all, you have no understanding of humanity. You can't lead people if you don't have an understanding of right or wrong. Where's
Brother-
the standard for that?
Brother Essence, Doctor, if I may for a second,
Please.
it was something you said last week that I kind of wanted us to build on, and you was talking about us, African people, African Americans, black people, how we cower with our intelligence.
Come on.
And I thought that was powerful when you said that, right?
Yes, sir.
Because it takes courage
Yes.
in order to fight for liberation. If you don't mind, could you kind of speak to that point?
Well, thank you, brother Sar. Well, yes, I often go back to what you all say when you say, know thyself.
Right.
And that's the foundation of our education, is who are we as a people? We built the pyramids. We are the architectures of the world.
Right.
So then when we think of ourselves, do we see ourselves in the right light? That comes from the physical, but it first started in the mental. Know thyself, so that we can display something with our hands that is positive. So we do have the goods. First of all, to know ourselves is to say that we have the intellect to build, the intellect to respond. To somewhere along the way, the false information has told us that we're not intelligent enough to have a conscious or a very strategic or approach to life or to any of the solutions of the world. So for them to come back and even argue about our intelligence or how we set up the argument, we don't need to be manipulated or manipulate. That's their job. Our job is to push our intelligence and to recognize that we even have one that is worthy. I'm going to say that again. Our intelligence and our way of African-centered living is worthy on the international platform.
And what I want to say about that, because I really like what you said when you said we cower under our intelligence, and that is we're very intelligent as a people.
Yes, we are.
Even those who take on a Eurocentric ideology.
Yes.
You know, a lot of our brothers and sisters that's in state government, federal government.
Talk about it.
Or even local government, very intelligent. They learn everything that the European has to offer. And I said this before. If you can learn that, you can learn this. You can learn an African-centered way of doing things. So when you said that we cower under our intelligence, I was like, wow, we want to emulate and imitate and regurgitate those philosophies that the Europeans basically bring forth. But we don't even want to look at our own intelligence. So we feel like once we have achieved a certain level of, accomplishments under the European system, we unfortunately, in a lot of cases, look at our brothers and sisters like we got something that they ain't got because we thinking like the white man, and they're not.
It's true.
And I feel like that right there is
That's
the
good.
falsification of African consciousness that Dr. Amos Wilson talked about. Right? Now, if these same brothers and sisters will realize, if I can learn this, I can learn that, and then I can make a comparative study on which one best benefits me, my family, my community, and my people.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's an honest thing to ask of our brothers and sisters to do.
Right.
If you've learned that, let's learn this.
Right.
Right? And let's compare the two and see which one is better for us.
That's good. And if, like you said, Brother Sar, if we go back to our own intelligence and respect our own mindset, we don't spend as much time trying to purchase a lie or purchase another man's way of thinking. Especially when we know that their way of thinking does not benefit us as a whole. Now, it may benefit some individually, but it does not allow us to come together as a whole. Outside of being ruled by the European oppressor, mind you, if we came together, say for instance, like the Black Panthers, if we came together, how long would we last? Because we know they are intimidated by our intelligence. They were key. When we show our individual intelligence collectively, we go on the COINTELPRO list. They become terrorists. Their entire government is intimidated by our mindset.
Right.
And so as long as you're rapping and you in the game playing ball, matter of fact, you can perform at the Super Bowl, be in a game and be their top performer, and they send you all over the world.
Right.
But as long as your other mission has to be somewhat looking like you destroy the black community.
Right.
I just went to a vigil yesterday where our children were just in the middle, mourning the death. But death is all around them every day, the music and everything. And so let me say this. Propaganda is very tricky because on one hand, they'll be pushing the heroes that's killing us in our community.
Right.
When we talk about propaganda, we got rap artists who play both sides of the field.
Right.
Killing us while making music.
Right. Yeah.
And will be flown by the United States government all around the world as a hero. So, first of all, we have to distinguish what's right and what's wrong. I think we're going back to...
That's number 9.
We got to go back to just plain, not what's popular, not what's propaganda. And let me say this. Once you understand truth at its purest form, you don't want to be like the chickens anyhow. You want to be like an eagle. And sometimes that's causing us to sort of separate from the lie. Because America spends billions of dollars, not millions, on trickery.
Right.
Mental trip propaganda. Yes. They spend millions of dollars And the sad part is most of us cannot see how much the value that America places strategically to keep us under control.
You know, I would like to make a statement because Dr. Kim just mentioned truth, right? And we talked about the philosophers, psychologists, social scientists, Joseph Nye of Harvard, and Al Athousen from France and their philosophies.
Sure.
And I want to talk about our philosophy from an African Center perspective, the philosophy of Maya,
Right.
the philosophy of enlightenment. Maya is dealing with truth, justice, righteousness, order, balance, harmony, reciprocity. Remember when I stated earlier in the show how the way that we learn are what we're being taught, right? What we see and what we hear.
That's right.
So it's important for us to teach our babies, our children, our young people, our community about truth, justice, and righteousness. Because what does truth do to propaganda? It destroys
Come on.
propaganda,
Come on.
right?
Yes.
Because it destroys truth, destroys falsehood, right?
Destroys
Just
the
like knowledge dispels what? Ignorance,
Ignorance.
right? So when we understand what our ancestors basically put in place, you know, not only for Africa but for the world, because the foundation of all knowledge comes from Africa, all sciences. So when we start to teach our children these high values of know thyself, Maya, truth, justice, and righteousness, the 10 virtues of initiate, control your thoughts, control your actions, have a purpose, have faith in your teacher's ability to lead you on the path of truth. When we start taking on these high values and principles, what we're doing is giving our children a solid foundation.
That's right.
Where they can say that they're firmly established in the knowledge of self. They're firmly established in the knowledge of Maya. To think Maya, speak Maya, and do Maya. That automatically, right, counters any type of propaganda that comes our way, because we understand the main purpose of life is the great awakening, to know thyself, spiritual enlightenment. So we're looking at things with a spiritual eye, and we're able to distinguish that which is real and that which is unreal.
And to help us have a defense against these type of
That's
tactics.
right. Yes.
Because if we don't have a defense against it, then we have to make a choice of either to join them or don't say anything. And so when we are teaching these principles, it helps our children build a confidence to even have courage to defend or
That's
use
right.
their real intelligence
That's
against
right. Which is the number one defense is the mind.
is the mind.
Right.
Exactly. And you know, I think you all said one of the quotes about the greatest tool of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed.
That's right.
So
Stephen Biko.
right, exactly. So when you are teaching, you're building up the mental capabilities to respond correctly. The word responsible means I am able to respond. Did we give our children the tools to respond?
That's right.
Did we give our people the tools to respond? Or did we allow them to go through an entire education system that is manipulative, oppressive, and digressive?
Right.
What is our response? What is our responsibility? And are we able to respond? And that is what I leave with you all today.
Last 5 minutes. I want to ask a couple more questions real
Please.
quick because I know how important it is to study Ma'at, to know thyself. You know, just knowledge of self is foundation, and that's where we all should start at. But let me ask you: how you think it's important to study Western philosophers and their philosophies?
Yes, I just stated that a few minutes ago. I think it's very important
Come on.
to understand, our enemies and the way that they think. Sometimes it may look like, these philosophers or things are taking the side of the people when really they're just outlining things that are going to be effective to control the people.
That's right.
Right, because soft power, hard power is all about controlling the masses and controlling, the economy. Because, and this goes back to what we talk about a lot on this show, is capitalism, right? So basically they want to make money while destroying us at the same time, or make money while killing us, because
That's
what
right.
that does is keeps us off balance and keeps us destabilized. So they use every tactic possible. So that's why it's important for us to wake up with the knowledge of self. And it's a reason why we don't have the knowledge of self. It's a reason why our brothers and sisters who are born on the continent in Africa don't have the knowledge of self. And it's because of what? The transatlantic slave trade or global Eurasian human trafficking, colonialism, imperialism, all of these tactics that has been used by our enemies, right? Using propaganda, using soft power, using hard power, using ideological state apparatuses. The way not only do they feed us European curriculum here, but also in Africa,
Yes.
Yeah.
right? And then repressive
Yes.
state
Yes.
apparatus, the
Right.
force that they use what in Nigeria by dropping bombs. So all of these things are important for us to understand as a people, so that we learn to believe in ourselves. And I'm glad, Dr. Kim, that you stayed on our intelligence, right? Because we're
Yes.
very intelligent people. We're the original scientists on this planet, and this is the type of information that we have to teach our babies, as opposed to teaching them that they come to school with a deficiency and they have to be put on psychotropic drugs and they have all kind of anger management problems and things of that nature. You will have an anger management problem also
Absolutely.
if you come from a lineage of people who've been done so wrong, the way a lot of our children are. But it's up to us to turn that around with our knowledge, with our courage, and with our power.
That's right.
Right,
Absolutely.
right. And that was powerful. Dr. Kim said, stop cowering behind your intelligence.
Yes.
Own your intelligence.
That's right.
So, Dr. Kim, let me ask you this real quick before we have to close it up.
Yes, sir.
As African people on the continent and in the diaspora, what strategies, planning, and organizing are necessary for African people to destroy the propaganda?
Well, first of all, I'm going to give them back this word: freeze. Freeze is the word that I'm gonna say. You're under arrest, America. And there's a new sheriff in town, and it is a higher intelligence, and it is coming from the African diaspora across the globe. So you don't have to say that you're a criminal. We say you're a criminal, and we're here to arrest not only you but your behaviors as well. Now we hope that religion will save your soul, but just in case you don't, won't you create that bill called the Save Act and save yourself? Because again, it is time for you to sit down and reflect. And if you can't, RTP has pills for you that you've created for everybody else and that you've used to propagandize on us. We will now say, take your own pill and chill, since you like our music so much. There you are.
Brother Sar, how you think we going to restore that global perception of African people?
By doing, similar things like we're doing now, by,
Yes.
developing our institutions, our own institutions, changing the way we think, the way we look at one another, building the family structure back up, which is an institution in itself. We have a whole lot
Yes.
of work to do, but the great thing about it is that, we are a great spirited people, with great intelligence. And I think that, what we have to do is just, spark the minds of our brothers and sisters and spark the minds, for liberation, unification, connecting with our brothers and sisters throughout the diaspora and on
Yes.
the continent. I think that's very important. I think that's one thing that, we need to really start working towards, especially with this, resolution just being approved by the United Nations. It's time for us to go to work.
Yes.
The intelligence we have as far as, policies, laws. Dr. Kim worked with policies and laws. From a global perspective, I see us, unifying. I think that we have to
Yes.
organize to the point where that we're clear in our steps when we're talking about reparations and we're talking about, sovereignty as far as for Africa and for African people. I think that, with this resolution being passed and a lot of other things going on in Africa, that if we keep our eye on the prize and we don't let them distract us and don't let them trick us, that we can keep making progress so that our future generations will have true African liberation and African power.
Absolutely.
Well said. Well said.
And we believe that our liberation liberates the rest of the world.
That's right.
Because we don't succumb to capitalism
Right.
or any kind of ism for that matter. We believe in liberation, and so we believe that is for when we say justice for all, and then when we say terms that refer to that all God's people are created equal and endowed, we actually mean it. It is not that we have a slave behind our back, or we don't have something else that we have going on, but you can count on us as the original people.
Right.
To hold that true.
Right quick, Kanye
Yes.
West, Kyrie Irving, when they made those comments a few years ago about the Jews and
Yes.
everything with
Yes.
anti-Semitism and how they attacked them and they took all that money from Kanye West, I want to go back to the point that Baba Akmos made. Anti-Africanism.
That's
I
right.
think, and
That's
this is
good.
for all the listening audience.
I like it.
Anytime anything said, anything negative about any black person or any African person, we need to respond as Dr. Kim had recommended.
Yeah.